Okay, so everyone, welcome. Hello, welcome. Should I just stand up? Is that good? Yeah, okay. We're here to introduce and welcome Dr. Måns Broo, senior lecturer at the Department of Study of Religions at Åbo Akademi University in Finland, an affiliated research fellow at the Oxford Center of Hindu Studies. Dr. Broo's academic journey has been marked by a profound engagement with the study of yoga, ritual, and Bengali Vaishnavism, earning him international recognition in the fields of religious studies and sociology. But today, Dr. Broo will share insights from his pioneering research project in the middle and in the margins, yoga practitioners in Finland, which he leads as a principal investigator. This study is particularly noteworthy as it ventures beyond traditional textual analysis to explore the empirical and sociological aspects of yoga practice today. By focusing on the lived experiences and attitudes of yoga practitioners in Finland, Dr. Broo's work seeks to uncover the diverse worldviews that inform modern yoga and how these intersect with broader cultural and political currents. So, and just by the way, I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Adriana, and I am a PhD candidate at the Open University under the supervision of Suzanne Newcomb. And it's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Måns Broo.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. I'm honored to be here to speak something on what I think is a very exciting project that I'm privileged to lead. As you kindly mentioned, I'm really a textual scholar myself, which of course fits well into the yoga studies that are done here at SOAS. I brought as a present to the center a small book, my latest book.
Oh, wow.
It's volume 1 of a ritual text of Bengali Vaishnavism. But so that's kind of my essence as a scholar. I'm a textual scholar. I'm in many ways a very old-fashioned kind of scholar, as I perhaps look as well. But I work at a department in Finland, which is mainly focused on the sociology of religion. And working there, I've been part of several different projects in the last 10 years or so, where we have been exploring various aspects of religion from a sociological point of view. And having a permanent position in the university world is, of course, a very rare thing. Where I work at our department, we are three persons who have permanent positions. One is the head of the subject, and then there are 2 lecturers, and I'm one of those. So having a privilege like that, a monthly salary that drops onto my account every month, unless I do something major bad, of course, brings with it also responsibilities. And one of these responsibilities is trying to procure research funding for junior scholars who don't have that security and privilege of a fixed position. And in Finland, there are some scholars that are interested in various aspects of yoga. So a couple of years ago, we got together and we were thinking, what could we do all together that would be a project that might get funding? This is one of the big dilemmas in academic studies today. Many of the things that we old-fashioned textual scholars think are extremely interesting, like publishing 4 thick books like this, may not be seen as that interesting by the persons holding the funds. Nevertheless, if we broaden our perspectives and leave those books for a while, we'll notice that there are many interesting things that we can study out there in the world. that have to do with yoga and that have also some social impact and social importance. And that can be then pitched to funding agencies. And this is what we did. We thought, what kind of research on yoga is being done? And more importantly, what kind of research on yoga is not being done? And one of the things that we found is that there's very little studies on yoga practitioners. Now, I'm not saying there's no studies like that. I mean, Susan Newcomb, of course, is an excellent example of a person who is studying the people who do yoga. But that's one of the things that we found, especially when it comes to Finland. We have studies on what happens when you do yoga, the financial aspects, marketing, things like that have been studied. But there's very few studies, even internationally, on the people who do yoga. Like you, or you, or you, maybe all of us. Who are the people who are doing yoga? And people have, of course, preconceived opinions. Yogis are people, in Finland, the stereotype of a yogi is a person who lives in a suburb outside of the capital of Helsinki, a woman in her 40s, votes Green or Left Party. That's the yogi. However, in recent years, another kind of stereotype of yogis has emerged in media and in popular discourse in Finland. Approximately since the COVID pandemic. That is that the yogi still is the 40-year-old woman, but now she's also somebody who's dead against vaccines, who holds all kinds of scary conspiracy theories, holds to them, and who is somehow a suspect person. But these are just stereotypes. This is not based on any research. So we wanted to do that research. So we here means, no, maybe just like that. Yeah. We means these people here. That's me with a slightly bigger beard. Here we have Dr. Janne Kontola. He's a yoga teacher as well. He holds his doctorate from my university. This is Ella Poutiainen. She's a doctoral candidate. She just had her viva a few days back. And here is Kia Andel. She's going to defend her doctoral thesis next spring. And these three people are brilliant scholars. And together we came up with this idea of studying the persons who do yoga in Finland and to look at a few different things in particular. One of them is worldviews. I'm going to come back to that later today. Worldview studies is something that my department at Åbo Akademi University has been engaging in for the last 8 or 10 years. And something that we thought would be very interesting to do with yoga practitioners. What kind of worldviews do they have? What kind of worldviews do they share? Where are the differences? We're not expecting to find that every yogi is the same, obviously. But are there some commonalities? When you say that you're a yogi, what does that actually mean for your worldview? So that's one thing. We also wanted to look at the values of yoga practitioners. This is something we've also done in previous projects, my department, using Shalom Schwartz's value types. Then, especially Ella here is interested in the politics around yoga. And also the views on sexuality among yogis, the views on gender, all kinds of issues around LGBTQ+. are yogis these kind of neoconservatives holding a very kind of traditional binary view of gender as we see, for example, in the Tantra milieu today? Or how are they when we look at them a little bit larger? And Kia here, she's particularly interested in conspirituality. And this was a new word for you, I think you said. So let me just open that up just a little bit. Conspirituality is spirituality, which has various types of conspiracy theories as an integral part. Now, this is a word that can easily be seen as a pejorative word. I mean, if you believe in a conspiracy theory, you don't think it's a conspiracy theory. It's the truth. The conspiracy theory, that's a word, that's an ethic word that often is used to push people down. Oh, that's just a conspiracy theory. And I'll speak a little bit about this later, the kind of challenges inherent in this kind of research. Nevertheless, this is a very topical theme, of course, especially since the COVID pandemic, when many high-profile yogis in Finland came out with very kind of anti-vaccine and so on statements. So what we are doing is then we have a 4-year project that has been funded by the Finnish Research Council. My boss at work, the head of my department, he very much encouraged me to apply for this funding. I've been lazy with things like this in the past, but he encouraged me very much. With the result that my project was the last one to get funding. And the first one not to get funding was a project led by my head of department. So I don't know how happy he was about having encouraged me, but sometimes it's like that. Nevertheless, so we got we got money from there, and then there's a thing which is well known in economics in general, but which also works in the academic world. Money attracts money. So when it was seen that we got this money from the Research Council, then this Polin Institute, which is a smaller institute of religious studies in my hometown, they contacted me and basically asked me if I want more money. So I said, yes, please. So we are very fortunate to be funded by these 2 different institutions, which means then that these 3 people will be working with the project until the end of the project in 2027. So what we will be doing then in practical terms is a few different things. And I'm going to today speak about 2 of them. A survey and then something called a yoga cue sort. And probably this thing is going to be new for you. So I hope to spend some time with that. Then Kia and Ella are also going to do interviews, participant observation, and ethnography, but they haven't started that material gathering yet. I don't have anything to say about that. And even these 2 first things, I'm going to focus on them today. But what I'm going to say today is very much preliminary findings. We haven't finished the material gathering phase yet. And in fact, what I'm going to say today might not be accurate, since the data used for the analysis today is from October, and we have new material since then. So very much this is to be seen as an explorative study. And please don't quote me now on yoga practitioners in Finland are like this. Rather, what I want to do is I want to show you what kind of results we can get using these methods and the kind of material that we have. And this, of course, is an essential part of any research project. We're not only interested in the results, we're also interested in developing methods. And I hope that some of the methods of this project might be then picked up and refined and used perhaps with better results by later scholars. And this is also something I've learned from these earlier projects at the department. The focus on method and developing method. So let me begin with some of the things that we have learned through the survey. So we created a survey, and if you want to, you can go and have a look at it at our web page. You scroll down to the bottom, you'll find the survey there. It's available in 3 different languages, in Finnish, Swedish, which are the national languages of Finland, but also in English. But I'm asking you, if you have a look at the survey, and you're very welcome to do so, please don't fill in and send it in unless you identify as a Finnish yoga practitioner. So if you do that, you're very welcome to fill it in, but don't do it otherwise, because this is our focus in this study. We love all of you non-Finnish yoga practitioners, but our focus here is practitioners in Finland. And we hope, of course, that the Finnish material will be able to tell us something about trends happening, at least in Europe, but perhaps elsewhere as well. Because, of course, anybody who is in the yoga world today in any way will know that this is very much an international what should we call it? International trends with yoga teachers traveling, learning, spreading ideas in quite dynamic ways. Nevertheless, our focus is on Finland. The survey, as of October, had 385 responses. By now, there are about 450. We have distributed this survey in a few different ways. Some of us, 3 of us in the team, are yoga teachers, teaching asana, or in my case, yoga philosophy, sometimes at teacher trainings and so on. So we've used our own networks to reach out to yoga practitioners. We've also posted about this research on various social media groups directed towards yoga practitioners. We've also spoken about this research in yoga publications, such as the Finnish Yoga magazine. So we've tried to get it kind of out there. But this is a fairly extensive survey, and it has 2 parts. The first part is a straightforward survey. It will ask you where you live, not which city, but city or rural, what's your age, gender, these kind of things. And then things, of course, having to do with your yoga, but a very kind of ordinary type of survey, the kind of surveys that you'll get in your own email all the time. Now, what do you do when you get a survey like that in your email? You delete it. And that happens here, I'm sure, as well. It takes a fair amount of time to do it. What do you get for doing it? Nothing. You don't get a movie ticket or a coffee. You don't get anything for it. So we're actually asking for something quite substantial for people to invest their time in our research. Now, fortunately, people have responded, and we have already gotten a fair number of replies. But we are hoping, excuse me, for a bit more. Out of these 385 that I'm going to speak about a little bit today, the large majority are women, 323, which will not come as a surprise to anyone. Yes?
Do you know how many people practice yoga in Finland, and what percentage of the population is that?
We don't know. Nobody knows. And this is, of course, a problem everywhere. We can guess, and estimates are as high as maybe 100,000 people out of about 5 million. So it's a lot of people. It's certainly more than 385. And reaching people primarily through social media also means that you get a particular type of respondents. Not necessarily everybody is going to respond to that. Also, when I come to the second part, this yoga cue sort part, that's a part of that's kind of a second part of the survey. When you do that, it says in the survey that for the second part, you want to be able to do this on your phone. You need to have a bigger screen. Nevertheless, lots of people try to do it on the phone, and then they are upset that they can't complete it. So out of the ones who do the first part of the survey, no more than about 60% complete the second part. So getting the survey out there, getting people to reply to it is not so easy. And usually what is needed is some kind of personal contact, that they know one of us in the team, or that their teacher knows one of us in the team. And this has been one of the most successful ways for us to get respondents. When we've been able to convince one of the kind of more famous teachers in Finland that this is something interesting and something important, then lots of their students have filled in the survey. So 323 women, 57 men, 5 other. There was an alternative for that as well. Not that many, as might perhaps have been expected, but I might come back to that later. So one of the things that we asked in the survey is, what kind of yoga do you do? And here we had pre-decided options for them based on our knowledge of what kind of yoga is done in Finland. Most of these things will be familiar to you if you know the yoga world. There's Vinyasa flow, there's Kundalini, there's Iyengar, there's Yin, there's Hatha yoga, Bhakti yoga. Bhakti yoga usually means something like ISKCON or something like that. Ashtanga yoga, also quite popular. This is something unique for Finland. SJL yoga means the Suomen Yoga-liitto, or Yoga Federation of Finland. It's a quite large organization consisting of many kind of local organizations. They teach a type of yoga which is based on the latter teachings of Krishnamacharya. So it resembles Vini yoga as taught in Chennai in some ways, but it's also in some ways uniquely Finnish. And some of the things that this yoga association has been trying to do already for decades is to create a yoga which is uniquely Finnish, and where we don't have Sanskrit names for asanas, where there are no gurus, no gods, and things like that. So a kind of like Finnish secular yoga. The most popular type of yoga, almost 1/3 of respondents stated that they do Hatha yoga. Now, Hatha yoga, of course, is famously a word with many different meanings, an ambivalent term. I think here Hatha yoga just means physical yoga in some way. And I think it's also a term that is used as a kind of catch-all term. If you don't do yin, or you don't do Shivananda, or you don't do vinyasa flow or ashtanga, then you do hatha. It's kind of like what remains after you leave off everything else. This finished type thing, this also used to be called hatha yoga up to perhaps 10 years ago. So there may be some overlap here as well. Otherwise, we see that Iyengar, which of course is huge in some other parts of Europe, is not very big in Finland. Just a few respondents stated that they do Iyengar yoga. The same with many of these others. Kundalini, a little bit bigger. Vinyasa flow, surprisingly, for me at least, surprisingly popular. Ashtanga is big in Finland. For many years, Finland had the largest Ashtanga school outside of India in the world, in Helsinki. Ashtanga here meaning, of course, the Ashtanga Vinyasa system. Coming from Krishnamacharya and then developed by Pattabhi Jois and today carried on by many teachers. In the 90s, this was kind of the new wave of yoga coming to Finland after this kind of previously more popular style. Today, of course, the yoga world has diversified in Finland, but nevertheless, Ashtanga remains quite large in Finland and quite popular. So this is kind of the types of yoga that we have to do with here. And just as you did, by the way, you're free to ask questions at any time. Don't wait for me to say yes.
No hot yoga.
There's no hot yoga. We had that as an option. We had both hot yoga and Bikram yoga. 0 on both. Very interesting, especially in a country which is not the hottest. There is something like that in Finland, but it's not something you do regularly. It's like you go to a spa and you might do sauna yoga. But I don't think anybody wrote that down. There was an option for other, so it might be in there, but sauna yoga might be there. But Bikram, hot, not a single reply on those. Yes. Yes. Christian yoga is, of course, it can take different forms in different countries, but the idea is to use the physical and mental practices of hatha yoga, asana, pranayama, and things like this, but use them to somehow work and practice your Christian religion. In Finland, this goes under the name of the yoga of silence. But the teachers, most of them have some connection with the Lutheran Church, which is the predominant Christian church in Finland. It's very few respondents. Very few respondents. Nevertheless, this is a big thing in Finland. And this is one of the things that we need to work with. We need to get this survey out there among these people. For some reason, we're not reaching them. We know that there are plenty of people doing this, but for some reason, we haven't been able to reach them. Or then we have reached them, but they don't consider this to be their main yoga. They do this maybe once a week, but then they do Ashtanga or they do Hatha yoga otherwise. And this, of course, is one of the tricky things with the survey. It's difficult sometimes to know exactly how people think when they reply. And it's also dangerous when you have a category like this, other. What does that actually mean? We gave then with other, there's a free form, then you click other and then you write Shivananda or something like that. But not everybody does that. They might just click other and write nothing.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Are there any correlations or relations with the type of yoga and the worldviews, like a
Yes.
specific?
Yes.
Can you develop on?
I'm going to do that.
All right. Sorry.
Yeah, she's a person who is focused on the future, I see. So I'll have to come back to you. I'm a little bit slower than you. One thing that we asked in the survey is a question on belonging. Maybe you know the religious scholar Abby Day. She's written on believing in belonging, which is a thing in many of the Northern European countries. That is that you express your religiosity primarily through your belonging, institutional belonging. In Finland, for example, about 66% of the whole population belongs to the Lutheran Church. Out of these people, very few attend church more than for weddings or funerals or perhaps for Christian. So Finland is a very secularized country, but a country that retains a large number of people who belong to the church, who are members of the church, pay church tax, and so on. It's a number that is decreasing steadily, but it's still about 66%. Here, the Lutherans are not even 50%. So among the yogis, this 66% doesn't. That's the national average. Here it's quite a bit lower. No religious belonging. That's the largest group here. So the yogis in Finland, at least the ones that we've been able to reach, they have less of a religious belonging than the kind of general Finns. Finland doesn't have a state church, but it has two kind of traditional churches. One is the Lutheran Church, the other is the Greek Orthodox Church. These are, of course, both Christian denominations. There are some yogis in our survey who report belonging to the Greek Orthodox Church. It's a small church in Finland, primarily in the eastern part of Finland. So these numbers are more or less representative of Finland as a whole. Nobody belongs to the Catholic Church among our people. There's not even one Muslim, not even one Jew. There are some others. These others are, again, difficult to pin down, but many of them have thankfully stated what they belong to, and usually it's some kind of Hindu based group such as ISKCON or Gaudiya Math or some group like that. Now, this is religious belonging, but belonging, of course, doesn't say that much. We did a study in a previous project, my department, on worldviews among young people in many different countries in the world. One of those countries was India, and we studied university students in different places in West Bengal in India. And one of the things that we asked them was this question: do you belong to a religious organization, group, or tradition? Hardly anybody said that they belonged to a religious organization, group, or tradition. Maybe 10% or 5% of the whole, everybody who answered. Then many of these were later on interviewed. And all the people who were interviewed, who had already answered that they don't belong anywhere, they very self-evidently spoke of themselves as being Hindus and Muslims. But they didn't feel that they belonged, because they thought belonging to a religion means that you're formally a member of some samaj or some Jamaat or something like this, which they weren't. So this believing in belonging, which is so typical of, for example, Finland, is very weird in many different places. So we asked another question as well, and that is, regardless of belonging or not, choose one or several that you relate to. So here we found some interesting things. Yes.
Jackie, actually.
Uh-huh.
Do survey respondents identify as spiritual rather than religious? Was there any?
Yes. Here we have something speaking exactly to this question. If you look at these columns here, the largest one here, this is when they get to choose, and they can choose several. Which of these things do you feel some kind of affinity with? So they get to choose between agnostic, atheist, Buddhist, and so on. Alternative spirituality, that's by far the largest. That's more than a third of the respondents. We also have here new, and these terms here are based on earlier studies in Finland. So these are terms that we suppose they would be aware of. New Age, a few here, paganism, shamanism. So if you take all of these together, there's quite a few who identify with some kind of spirituality rather than religion. The traditional religions, they do get some support. Islam, Judaism, not that much. One person felt somehow inspired by Judaism, two by Islam. But then you get Buddhism, unsurprisingly, quite popular. Hinduism, also quite popular. Agnosticism and atheism, slightly lesser so. Humanism, bigger. And here, of course, you could ask, what's the difference between humanism and, let's say, agnosticism? Well, that's a question for the people answering, but this is clearly a term that many find affinity with, and many also with Christianity. So even though we didn't find many people who said that they're doing Christian yoga, many people relate positively to Christianity. And then you get a few, perhaps Kundalini yogis, marking Sikhism, and so on. So here we get something about this religion versus spirituality, but this is also something that we will get more information about later. Because what I'm doing today is I'm highlighting just a few of the different answers that they gave. We asked them plenty of questions. So I've just picked out a few that I've analyzed and made into charts with the kind help of my sister-in-law, Eva, who lives in Chester. So she's helped me with this. And I have a few more. We also asked them about their sexual orientation. And here, of course, we're getting into, in many ways, interesting waters. The large majority, more than about 260, identified as heterosexual. And this was a question where there were no kind of predetermined answers. They would just write in free form. So I brought together many would write hetero or heterosexual. Some wrote normal or ordinary or like most people. So it's a very heteronormative world that we're speaking about. Some preferred not to say. And then you get a few of other types. Bisexuals, far more of those than people who identified as homosexuals. Some identified as pansexual, some as asexual, and some also as celibate. I'm not 100% sure how they saw the difference there, but nevertheless, this is how they wrote.
Sorry to interrupt. How come the sexuality affect their spirituality? Is there any connection with that in your study?
We haven't done that yet. We haven't correlated this yet, but this is something that will be very interesting to see. And this is something that particularly one of the scholars is going to look at in her part of the whole project. Ella Poutian, and she's looking at, for example, these kind of yoga groups that are directed to non-binary people, for example, where the teachers explicitly try to kind of break away from this kind of I'm normal thinking. So this is something that would be interesting to see in the future. But so far we haven't yet done this. There's so many things that could be done with this stuff that we haven't done yet. Yes.
Do you know if those findings reflect the population as a whole, generally speaking?
I haven't looked at it yet, but I would suspect yes. I don't think that this is very unique. There might be a little bit more of all of this, but not dramatically more. Not dramatically more.
And it's predominantly women.
Yes. Yes, this is.
So maybe when women are introduced,
Maybe. And I mean, that's something that we haven't done yet. We haven't crossed this with gender. Cross-correlated those two. That will be interesting to see as well. Another hot topic in the world of yoga is ethnicity. And this is a particularly tricky question in Finland, which, similar to the other Nordic countries, doesn't have a discourse on race. In Finland, we think that we don't have racism, for example. There's no racism in schools or anywhere, which is, of course, completely false. But there's no way of speaking about race in Finnish culture. So we don't have, for example, these kind of terms like the Americans have, Caucasian, and so on. So this was another question where we didn't give them ready alternatives, but rather they had to describe their own ethnicity. And they described it, and again, I've simplified this, but they described it in various ways. You can see that almost 3/4 said they're Finnish, which I wouldn't think to be an ethnicity in the first place, but that's what they wrote. They're Finnish. Then again, there's a fair amount of people who prefer not to say. Why? Again, it's difficult to say. Then we have people who say that they are white, Scandinavian, a few mixed, a few other, a few Western, a few European, a few Finno-Swedish, one Sami. Sami people are they live in the north of Finland. They are a national minority, kind of indigenous to northern Scandinavia. Only one here in this sample. So if we look at this chart, it looks very colorful, but really it's not. It's almost completely white. And this, of course, is something that scholars have seen for a long time in the yoga world. Maybe you have seen these surveys that are done by American yoga magazines. They never ask this question. They ask all kinds of things, but they don't ask about ethnicity. And I think the reason is that they don't want to see the result. Because of course there's a very strong discourse within yoga of yoga being for everybody. And this of course shows it's not really like that. Now Finland is not a hugely multicultural country. It's not like here. But this does not reflect the ethnic breakdown of urban Finland today. This is much more white than you'd expect if everybody was doing yoga. And this is interesting also because this question of ethnicity is here shown to be such a kind of uncomfortable question for many people. They're not quite sure how to answer it. We also asked about what party they last voted for. And here I need to give you a bit of a background because, of course, the political situation in every country is different. These are the parties that are up to here. These are the parties that are in the Finnish parliament at the present moment. They are here organized from left to right. With the left party here, this is what used to be the long time back. This used to be the Communist Party of Finland. They've gone through many different changes. Now they are a more general left party. Social Democrats, similar to Social Democrats in other countries in Europe. Yes?
Do you have 2 columns for each?
I'll come to that in a little while, but that's a good thing you notice. Green Party, the center party in Finland is predominantly a rural party. Swedish People Party, this is the party that is focused on the Swedish minority in Finland and their rights and position in the country. The Christian Party, Movement Now is a kind of liberal, market liberal little party. The moderates, that's kind of like the Tories maybe here. And then the True Finns are a kind of right-wing populist party. They don't have a background in the extreme right, like some populist parties in Europe. They have a background in kind of traditional populism, kind of standing up for the little people. But today they have become a haven for people who are against immigrants and so on and so forth. Now there are 2 columns for each. The blue one is the people in our survey. This is according to the latest nationwide survey. So we see some huge differences. The main difference is that by far the largest party among these yoga people are the Greens. They are supported by more than 35% of the yogis. Nationwide, they have less than 10%. This is a huge difference. And this fits very well into this first stereotype of the yogis being these ladies that vote for the Greens or for the left party, which is easily the second largest party. Social Democrats, which are the biggest party in Finland at the moment, they're not very popular here. Closest to kind of the nationwide numbers is the support for the moderates, the Tories. The True Finns, which today is a large party in Finland and actually part of the government at the moment. We have a tradition of coalition governments in Finland. So they are not the only party and not even the largest party in the government, but they are in the government. Their support among the yogis is quite small. So politically, it doesn't seem like the yogis fit into this second stereotype of people kind of supporting Trump, this kind of idea. We don't see that here. But it's important to realize that since these smaller parties here, we're just speaking about a few persons. So the numbers here are really too small for us to be able to say something very exact about these small ones. We see the big trends. We see the trend of the Greens, the left. This is a clear thing, but we shouldn't take, oh, thank you. Thank you. We shouldn't take the other numbers too serious. So it's trends that we're looking at here. A colleague of mine helped me to do some cross correlations. One of the things I did was to cross correlate political support and the type of yoga that people are doing. And we get then here these different things. Like here are the largest party, the Green Party, that's 132 people. What kind of yoga are they doing? Hatha, 1/3. We don't really see any big trends here. I mean, if we look at the true Finns, all kind of things. Swedish People's Party, there's no Kundalini yogis there, but it's so few people. It's just 6 people. So it's too small numbers to say anything really interesting. So I was hoping I would have something interesting to tell you about this, but I don't. And sometimes the research is like this. We hope to get something, not always. But there's something slightly more interesting when we look at conspiracy theories. We have a whole lot of questions on conspiracy theories. And of course, we don't present them as conspiracy theories. Rather, we present them as opinions. We've taken over these questions from some studies that have been done on this before. And I picked out one of them. We have all kinds of things here, like the government secretly assassinates opponents, aliens are interacting with world governments behind the scene, these kind of things. I just picked up one. Much important information is hidden from the general audience. And then I cross-correlated the persons who completely agreed with this on a scale from 1 to 5. They wrote 5 on that, or 4. So the people who really support this, and cross-correlated that with the parties that they have supported. And here we have a tendency, which is quite clear. These populist parties, far-right populist party, the true Finns, they come first here. So there seems to be the same kind of tendency that you'll find in some other countries of a correlation between conspiracy theories and far-right politics. Again, this is tentative. It's not that many people, but there's something here. Now, this may not come as a big surprise, but I find this to be quite telling nevertheless. We have this kind of majority of yogis supporting left or center-left parties, but the ones supporting the right-wing parties, they are also the ones that score the highest on these conspiracy statements. So this second stereotype that I began with, the anti-vaxxers and so on, they're certainly present there among the yogis. So this was the first part of my presentation. And I see I have half an hour left. So the second part is on this Q methodology. Q methodology is a methodology used within sociology, which is developed, I think, in the 30s originally as a way of assessing subjectivity. It's been used, for example, in studies on consumer behavior, on workplace dynamics, and so on. And the system is that you have a set of statements, usually printed out on cards, which you then sort based on your subjective preferences. So if you're studying, for example, how people shop, you might have a statement saying that I always go for the cheapest things. Another one saying I always go for my particular brands, or I go for the ones that are most conveniently placed in the store. And then you have many different statements, and you end up with the sort of them on a board. And these results are then factor analyzed and formed on a quantitative basis for shared preferences. So this is a method which is a mixed method approach. That you do a kind of quantitative study on people's statements. You analyze them then through a statistical program. But you then need to analyze the factors that come out qualitatively. And we've been doing these kind of studies at my department before. So what we did was that we created a new sort based on some worldview studies we had done before, but then adding statements that had to do particularly with yoga. And I'll give you some examples in a little while. So when you place out these statements on the board, and you can do this physically with the board, or then you can do this on the computer. You begin by placing all the statements in 3 piles. I like this. Yoga is meant for spiritual development. Yes, that's plus. It's fine to sell yoga as a commercial product. No, I don't agree with this. I put that in minus. Reality is made up of 2 basic principles, Prakriti and Purusha. I don't know what that's about, so I put that in neutral. So you make 3 different piles first. And then when you've done that, then you place out the positives and the negatives and the neutrals on a board where there's limited space for at the far right and at the far left, the things that you really agree with and the things that you really disagree with. So what you need to do is you need to think, I agree with these statements, but some of these, when I compare them with each other, I realize, no, this is actually something that's really important for me. So by doing all of this, a kind of outlook profile is being created, which is particularly then based on your strong opinions, on things that you find agreeable or disagreeable. So the board, excuse me, it looks like this. So you only have 4 things that you really hate and 4 things that you really like at the other end. And then in the middle, it's more lukewarm. So we have about 200 of these sorts by now, but we haven't analyzed this yet because it doesn't make any sense to do this before the whole material is collected. So instead, I'm going to present the results of a pilot study that we did last year in Stockholm, Sweden. We did this pilot just to kind of try out this system and to see what kind of results it might bring. So this says nothing about Finland. I mean, I'm not expecting it will be very different, but this is just to kind of show you what kind of things we can do with this system. And if all of this is still very vague and difficult to understand, don't worry. I think you'll get the hang of it in a little while. So we did a pilot study in Stockholm, and we did it in Stockholm because we didn't want to kind of use up the informants for this. So we tried it out in a different location. In Stockholm, because it's close to Finland, also because we knew yoga teachers there who could help us distribute this. So we got 48 completed sorts, and since they also did the survey, we could also then correlate them with how they had answered in the survey. Here, the main group were Ashtanga yogis. And this is not so much because that's so huge in Sweden. I mean, it is fairly big in Sweden, but it's mostly because the contacts I had in Stockholm, most of them were Ashtanga yogis. But we aimed at getting other types of yogis as well. Kundalini yoga, Bhakti yoga, Hatha yoga, other types as well. And when we analyzed this material, 3 main kind of worldviews came out. And these worldviews, they are not then indicative of any particular individuals. Rather, they are based on the material as a whole. And nobody is going to be 100% worldview 1, 2, or 3, but rather they will load on these different worldviews to a larger or smaller extent. So the 3 kind of general worldviews that came out, we gave the names spiritual monist, Indic theist, and secular yogi. So these names, they're not there in the material. This is the kind of qualitative side here that we interpret these different worldviews and give them these names. And I'll show you why these names in a little while. So the idea here is that, let's say I do a research on what kind of pizza people like. So people would reply to that in different ways. But most people would kind of have somewhat similar preferences. They would be the margherita people, they would be the quattro formaggi people, they would be the frutti di mare people. Then there would be 1 or 2 kind of outliers, like the one that really loves raisins and bananas. But that kind of falls outside of the scope of the study because that's so kind of weird. But there would be these kind of main types of pizza people. So here we have 3 main types of yoga people. The first one is the spiritual monists. And here are some of the statements that they really agreed with. So these statements here are from these different cards that they sort. All is ultimately one. This they liked very much. They also liked that the divine is an energy rather than some kind of person, some kind of supernatural person. They also agreed with one can improve one's health by alternative means. They found inspiration in and from nature. And they are also inclined to embrace elements from various traditions. So coming back to the spiritual rather than religious people, this very much is this kind of a person. They disagreed with morality being something that is governed or dictated by religion. This was one of the cards that they placed in -3 or 4. They also rejected the idea that you should be loyal to the nationally predominant religion. Also, the kind of theocratic idea of society being governed by religion. They were also not interested in observing religious practices or laws. And the idea of giving up worldly or bodily pleasures for religion or spirituality was also weird to them. So this is clearly people who have some kind of ideas of something spiritual, and that being important for them. But they are not identifying with religion. either when it comes to practice or belonging. This was the largest group among these yogis in Stockholm. The second group we call Indic theists. And these people are theists in many traditional ways. They think that God is a person, contrary to the spiritual monists. They pray regularly, and they find the study of sacred texts to be important. They also value their own purity. Being religious or spiritual is central to their identity. And they're also actively involved in some religious community. So they are very much kind of traditional theists. But the reason why we call them Indic theists is that they also believe in reincarnation and the law of karma. This was something else they placed high there in the sort. They also experienced the change in their outlook. So most of these people are probably people who have converted to some kind of dharmic tradition. They see all religions as pointing to a common truth. But they also feel that you should have some kind of an external teacher. We didn't use the word guru because we wanted these statements to be as kind of accessible as possible. But that's, of course, one way that you can interpret this. The things that the Indic theists didn't like were again loyalty to the nationally predominant religion. They also didn't feel threatened by evil forces operative in the world. They did not think that religion is an illusory human creation. They did not feel that there's a need of creating new rituals or symbols. And they also did not agree with the statement that there's no higher purpose for humanity. So this is the second group, the Indic theists, and this was also a fairly large group. Many people scored very high on this prototype or this kind of ideal form. Third group we call the secular yogis. They agree with religion being an illusory human creation, like in the picture. They also felt that religion is bound to patriarchal attitudes. They agreed with individual freedom in choice of matters and morality. They did not see any higher purpose to the human species. But they also had some things to say about yoga in particular. They felt that the main purpose of yoga is to promote personal well-being rather than some kind of spiritual growth or something like that. They felt that it's acceptable to sell yoga products and services as business. And surprisingly, they also reported mainly associating with people with a similar outlook or tradition. This last thing is interesting because an important part of the discourse of many secular people is that they are very open-minded. I'm very open-minded, but actually they felt they preferred to hang out with people who are like themselves, which maybe is not a big surprise, but it's kind of one of these things where you see that what you say and what you do is not always the same. And that's, of course, something that any scholar interested in people will have noticed. The things they rejected were religion as a source of morality, following a religious or spiritual quest, the idea of religious beliefs as a key to salvation, this kind of Christian idea. They rejected following religious rules, laws, or a faith-based diet. They did not see events in this world in a spiritual or religious perspective. They rejected religion's role in governing society. They did not see stars and planets influencing events in the world. And in general, they rejected ideas that contradict science or rationality. So these three prototypes or these three kind of groups of worldviews have some things in common, all of them. Unconditional love is the highest value. All of these people, all of these yogis in Stockholm, regardless of whether they are Indic theists or secular yogis or whatever, they feel moved by music, art, or poetry. They feel that by turning inwards, you can gain knowledge of the outside as well. They have an interest in methods for altered states of consciousness. And they feel that health can be promoted by alternative means. So these are things that kind of describe yogis in general in Stockholm, or at least among this sample. The things that none of them liked was this idea of certain beliefs being central to salvation, like this Christian idea that you need to believe in the position of Jesus Christ and his sacrifice, and then you'll be saved. Nobody liked this. Nobody agreed with sexuality being something that should be guided by one's religious or spiritual outlook. Perhaps kind of hopefully for us, or we can be happy about this, nobody liked this idea that it's nice that bad people are going to be punished in the afterlife. There's a statement like that as well, that I take comfort in the fact that the unrighteous are going to be punished and get to suffer in the afterlife. And nobody feels here that they're battling with dark inner impulses. So this kind of sick soul in William James's psychology of religion, we don't find much support for that in this material. In Stockholm, we also cross-tabulated these outlook types with party support. The numbers here are very small, much smaller even than the numbers I showed for Finland. Nevertheless, there are some interesting correlations. The particularly interesting correlation is that between Indic theists and Sweden Democrats. Sweden Democrats are the far-right party in Sweden. They are a party with the background in like neo-Nazis and so on. So this is very much a far-right party, having quite a bit of support among the Bhakti yogis, the Indic theists. So this is an interesting thing here. Social Democrats, this is the largest group, mostly spiritual monists. And these are kind of the biggest things here. We also looked at yoga type correlated with outlook types. Unsurprisingly, the Bhakti yogis were mostly Indian theists, like ISKCON members and so on. But a fair amount also of Hatha yogis and Kundalini yogis. The secular yogis are mostly found among the Ashtanga yogis. And it means that there's a negative correlation. It's not surprising that the Bhakti yogis do not correlate with the secular yogis. So that's a negative correlation. So again, this is just indicative because the numbers are so small. But this is something that we look forward to doing in Finland, where we will have a much larger set of data to look at how these outlook types, I mean, we might end up with other types as well. It's not given that there will be 3. There might be 4 or 5. 3 internationally is what you usually end up with. That's been our experience. But we'll see what happens in Finland. But it will be interesting then to compare those worldview types, to look at what they will look at like. Will there be similar kind of commonalities as in the Swedish case, and then correlating them with what kind of yoga people do, what kind of political parties, gender, and so on. So basically what I'm trying to tell you, dear friends, is that we have already quite a bit of material, and we have a lot of work in front of us to do. I'm going to need plenty of help from my sister-in-law and plenty of help from my colleagues who know these things better than me. But I think I should shut up by now and leave some time for you for questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, man. I think you kind of show us how important it is to do some research and to understand who is practicing yoga, but also the challenges of doing this sort of research, as well as the opportunities to understand different aspects of this sort of research, politics, sexuality. And I have a question, because I read a little bit about the project before, and I don't think you touched much on that. What is the correlation with these worldviews with cultural appropriation? Would you like to develop a little with those two sides of your research? Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's just an open question, really, that connection of cultural appropriation and your worldviews. Thank you.
Thank you. This is an excellent question. Unfortunately, it's so excellent that I won't be able to say much about it. I mean, this is something that particularly Ella is going to do in her part of the big project. This is one of the questions that she's going to deal with. But she's just started her work, so she hasn't gotten there yet. So my answer would be basically just a guesswork. So I think I will not do that. Instead, I'll just have to say that please ask me again in a few years, and then maybe I'll be able to answer.
Thank you so much. Any other question from the audience?
I think you mentioned at the beginning, but do you know if any other research similar to this is being done anywhere else?
Not really. I mean, especially this. We've also done this value survey, which I haven't looked at that material at all yet. So what kind of value profiles will come up? This is stuff that's been done on a large scale in this world value surveys and so on. So that's stuff that we'll be able to compare then in interesting ways with larger populations. As far as I know, nobody's done that with yogis before. Similarly with these worldviews, which I left a little bit too little time for that today, but that's also something that nobody's done before. And also, in these kind of basic demographics, we do have some stuff like that in Susan Newcomb's work, for example. But as I began with, there's not much work like this on yoga practitioners from before, which is why even me as really a textual scholar, I really am excited about this. What will this let us know? And we have some people who are interested in doing similar stuff in smaller places around the world. There's one scholar who wants to use our worldview study method, this yoga Q sort, among people who teach yoga in prisons. She has a project around that from before. So she wants to use this method there and see what kind of worldviews will come out. But she hasn't done that yet. But I definitely think there's great potential here, and potential also of cooperation with research teams in different places.
You considered how you could possibly gauge a change in views starting to practice yoga to progressing?
Well, we considered having a question like this. I mean, we do have a question already. How long have you been doing yoga? And that might be interesting then in the end when we get to to look at the material in its totality. But it's always difficult when you ask somebody what they think. And they say, for example, that let's say somebody says that somebody scores very high on these conspiracy things, for example, and they say that they've been doing yoga for 10 years, which might be then above the national average. But it's very hard to say whether that their conspiracy thinking is because they've been doing yoga for a long time. This is very difficult to say. So we actually would have to do a longitudinal study and getting back to the same people in 5 years or 10 years. That would be quite interesting. And maybe we'll try to do something like this after this project is finished. But this is difficult to kind of to establish these kind of causal relationships. Like, for example, we also ask them whether they're yoga teachers or they are training to be yoga teachers. Again, does that change your worldview? Being kind of exposed perhaps to teachers who tell you that you should be interested in the Upanishads or whatever. Does that actually kind of affect your worldview, or is it something you kind of like, yeah, you listen to and then you just go on doing your own thing? It's difficult to say.
Interesting, I think. Interesting to see how many of those teachers may have studied and really involved my concepts with them, or the majority of them actually studied to teach in the same country.
Yeah.
That would affect the global.
Yeah. That's actually a weakness in the study. We didn't ask that question. Now that you say it, I feel like I'm an idiot. Why we didn't ask that? But maybe, yeah. It is. Yes.
Actually, request outside.
Yeah.
Sorry, we have a question online from Tamara. Was age data and education level data collected?
Yes, both of those.
Right.
I didn't bring that up today, but we have questions on both of that. Also, income level, this kind of basic social demographics.
Thank you. Any other questions?
There's one more Jackie has sent. I'm not sure if she's typed it as well. These three groups you have identified that hold different beliefs, specific political view, and practice certain yoga styles. How do you hope to use this information, and what decisions or policies might it inform?
That's a big question. Well, we hope to use it to, first of all, kind of show the varieties within the yoga field that are there. This kind of yoga Q research is really all about uncovering plurality. It's not about saying that yogis are 50% like this or 20% like that, but rather it's about showing kind of the general subjective kind of ideal types that are available in a particular population. So that's the main thing. We want to kind of broaden the understanding of what kind of worldviews are yogic worldviews. For example, in this Swedish case, we could see quite clearly that there are yogis who are quite secular, who don't want anything to do with religion, and not really anything to do with spirituality either. But they still had some things that clearly linked them to other yogis. For example, this idea of learning things about the world around you by going inwards, which we could say, well, that's really spiritual, isn't it? I mean, that's as close as you get to the very idea of spiritual. But they wouldn't say that. So what we try to do with this worldview exploration is really to kind of uncover these general standpoints, and then to kind of see, can this inform us about yogis all over the board? Now, what kind of policy statements might this inform? That's above my pay grade. I have no idea, to be honest. But it's a very important question, because of course, today we are not a very big audience here. But as scholars, of course, everything that we're doing is out there in the public domain. And this is a project that already, when it was funded, there was some media interest in it. People calling me, wanting to know what will this say about yoga in Finland and so on. So eventually, we're going to also disseminate our findings broadly. And this is, of course, always a tricky thing. As scholars, of course, we want to share the data we have collected, but we need to do it in a sensitive way. All of the data needs to be very carefully pseudonymized, at least, so that nobody can be identified. We've asked some pretty sensitive information from these people, like your sexuality, for example. Of course, we're not interested in individuals, so we're not going to kind of show any individuals. But nevertheless, when we then disseminate our findings, there might be backlash. And there might be people who say, well, this shows that yogis are this or that. Yogis have far-right political leanings, or yogis believe in crazy conspiracy theories. So then the onus is on us as researchers to present these findings in a way that will be understandable, but also relatable to. Which usually means, of course, we academics, we tend to say, things are like this, but they're also like this, and you also have to remember this, which really makes for boring kind of news. And media usually wants to hear, for example, that 85% of yogis are heterosexuals, or something like that. They want to go for like the kind of statistical data, and we have that stuff. But this is something that will be a big challenge for us, how to disseminate. And what people then will do with that, then that's something we can't influence very much, but we can influence the way we disseminate. I don't know if this really answered your question. But, okay.
Yeah, thank you.
And I think we have time for one more. Is that okay? You have a question? Yes, please.
Answer that they are practicing. But I just say something about how long it takes before someone identifies as a practicing.
I don't know.
Like you haven't seen on the, like, what is the smallest number?
The smallest is less than a year, I think. Yeah. So, but I haven't looked at that data yet, how many answered that. In the Swedish pilot that we did, the the age distribution was surprising. It was mostly people in the 40s and up. Very few young people, and it looks like that in the Finnish sample as well. But I haven't properly looked at that. And this thing that you're asking about, I haven't looked at all.
Okay, I'm going to abuse my position of chair to ask one last question, if that's okay. Have you considered focusing on practices like yogic techniques, like breathing practices, meditation, movement, instead of the styles of yoga, to see how this affects, one, the worldview, and two, the lived spirituality?
Well, not really. I mean, we asked them about we haven't asked about this, that what's your main yoga practice. This is something, again, like this question about international contacts, we could have done, and maybe we even should have done, but we didn't do that. Instead, we asked about the kind of style that they're doing, and that says something. I mean, there are some yogis who put meditation as their kind of yoga style. So these styles of yoga, some of them are kind of brands, like Bikram or Ashtanga, but some are them more kind of general terms, like Raja Yoga. That was one alternative. What does that actually mean? Most people would think that it's some kind of meditative yoga, maybe, but this will be interesting to look at in more detail eventually.
Thank you.
So we haven't really asked what you just asked about.
Yes,
Is it possible to capture the impact of this data and grouping on the yoga community? For example, how people start to self-identify and use these terms in public domain?
I think one of the things that one of these ladies in the project, Kia, this is one of the things that she's going to look at, because she's going to look at how particularly these kind of conspirituality ideas are negotiated and created in social media. But she's also going to look at self-identification. So she might look at this, what you're asking about as well. But it's nothing that comes through in the material that I was speaking about today, unfortunately.
Okay. We leave it there. Do you have any questions to the audience? Wow. Thank you so much, Dr. Måns Broo.
Thank you. And this is for the center.
Oh, amazing. Everyone. You should show it to people online. And thank you everyone online as well.
Thank you, Tamara.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. So many things I wanted to ask about. I've followed too much.